Welcome to the Money Maven Project podcast. If you're here to learn how to obtain freedom over your time and money through real estate investing, you're in the right place. Create the life you want by living with intention and becoming a Maven in mindset, money, and real estate. Now, here's your host, Justin Monk.
Hey, this is Justin Monk with the Money Maven Project podcast. I am super excited. We've got a big guest here. We've got Steve Rozenberg. See you all over social media, riding motorcycles, doing all kinds of cool stuff. Let's go ahead and introduce yourself, kind of tell us who you are and your story of how you got into real estate.
Yeah. First, obviously, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I've watched the show and I'm honored to be a guest here. It's funny. My jump into real estate is interesting because I never actually wanted to be in real estate. That was never my goal. Probably like other people, I had other plans in life. I had other ambitions. And through turns of events and things that happen out of my control, it kind of led me down the path of getting involved in real estate. For me, my background is being an airline pilot. And 9/11 is actually what caused me to take a turn for becoming a real estate investor, because I realized that the safe, secure job, or I should say the illusion of a safe, secure job, came to a head for me probably about 48 hours after 9/11 when I got my furlough notice. So I realized that I needed to have something else to rely on because it was not safe and secure. So I started looking at real estate, started kind of going down that path. And that was obviously about 20 years ago. And started learning how to wholesale, flip properties because I didn't have any money and I was on the chopping block and I didn't know if I was going to survive or not in the industry. And I learned a lot of skill sets in communication, negotiations and other stuff. Did very well. And actually I did so well, I made enough money. I bought my first apartment complex a couple years later. And then I started learning about multifamily and all that stuff. Sold that, ended up getting into single family. And went down the single family path, and everything that I learned and thought that I was on top of the world with multifamily, I basically got handed to me, very, very hard sledgehammer to the face, because you realize it's a different business model.
Yeah.
And I realized that the 30 or 40 houses that we owned were some of the worst investments I could have ever made. And that got me into having to figure out how to either get rid of them or manage them. Mm-hmm. And during 2009, 2010, nobody was buying anything, if you recall at the time.
Yeah.
So I had to learn to manage them. And that's what started me and my business partner creating a management company to manage our properties. We ended up realizing that actually was not only a business, but it was a very lucrative business and it was a very scalable model. And we took that, we scaled it to over 1,000 properties in 3 different cities inside of 7 years. Then we actually ended up selling that business to a venture capital backed firm and exited that deal. And then I started kind of down my path of being more of an influencer in the investing world. Up until that point, I was doing a lot in the property management sector, all the time being an investor and doing deals and transactions. So that's kind of the down and dirty, quick version of what got me to where I am today.
Yeah, perfect. Love that. It's a great story. So what are you focused on right now when it comes to investing for yourself? What kind of properties are you investing in and what method are you using?
Yeah. So what I do right now is you could say I'm kind of in the lazy years. I'm not looking to go to Home Depot every morning and grind it out and get the workers and all that. So I'm doing more passive stuff. I'm getting involved in some funds. I'm actually getting involved with some prop tech companies that they're using my knowledge and expertise to help them formulate some new models that are coming out. I do own some assets, mostly single family. I'm in some mobile home park funds. I'm in some self-storage, very, very large stuff. I'm kind of in the mindset now that I'm kind of letting my money work for me. Sometimes I loan out my money to other people and other things like that. My main focus really is which is interesting. You talked about mindset before we started is my main focus is on mindset with real estate. That's kind of my niche. I was trained by some very successful mindset thought leaders, not just in the real estate industry, but in that industry. And it was always very intriguing to me because I realized, it's buying 4 walls and a roof is 4 walls and a roof. It doesn't make you successful. neither does a certain decimal point or a comma in your bank account. Who you are and who you have to become is what defines your success. Yeah. And everybody has a different definition of success, and nobody ever should be like the same person next to them. You have to define your own definition of where you want to go and what strategy you're going to use. So my main focus is really helping people. It's kind of like you get to a point in your life. I've sold my business. I've done very well. I still am an airline pilot. So during all of that, I was an airline pilot the whole time. So I'm kind of that guy that says, look, don't tell me you can't do it. You can, you just choose not to because I've done it. And so I try to explain to people that, happiness is a place in your mind. It's a mindset. It's not a destination that all of a sudden one day you're going to wake up and say like, oh, I'm happy now. It doesn't work that way. I can tell you because I've sold businesses and I've realized numbers don't do that. And so I think it's a big misnomer that people think that a certain amount of doors or a certain amount of status or a certain amount of money in their bank is going to make them happy. And I'm sure you've interviewed enough people, and you probably know yourself that there's a lot of rich people out there that are miserable because that doesn't define happiness. I mean, there's a lot of people that are they're more miserable now with money than they were before because now they're afraid they're going to lose it. Mm-hmm. So I'm very intrigued by the mindset and how it can either accelerate you exponentially or it can be the leading factor that drives you right into the ground, or in flying, we say take you to the crash site quicker.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. No, I think that's huge. Success. I mean, the perspective you have, the mindset and the perspective you have around success, it needs to be a healthy one. It needs to be a correct one. And your view on what was going to make you happy is important. And not just what makes you happy, but making sure that you don't just expect for it to always be easy and no problems ever. Like there is no destination that's there. Like even if you're sitting on the beach somewhere retired, like it might be too hot. Like there's always you know what I'm saying? Like there's always going to be issues and obstacles. And if there's not, then you are either dead or you are just not progressing anymore. And so I think sometimes people think that success is where they get to a place where they no longer have problems and no longer have, obstacles and trials in their life. And I don't think that place exists, at least not in a healthy way and not in a way that you continue to give and to grow. So I think, having the right perspective. And you mentioned something that I'm a big fan of, I guess, the mindset of what truly the value in setting big goals and having success goals isn't achieving those goals necessarily. It is who you become in trying to reach those goals. I always use sports goals. Like if you're trying to run a certain time in a marathon or something, finishing the marathon under a certain time is an awesome goal to have. But it's the how good of the shape that you're going to have to get into to achieve that goal is where the real value, and the discipline that you're going to have over your mind in getting to that goal is where the real value is, not necessarily achieving the goal and that medal or that pat on the back at the end. And sometimes I feel like people just need to take a step back and shift their mindset around what they feel like success is going to be for them. And I think you hit it on the head.
It's, a lot of it is in my opinion, because I've gone through this and I'm still going through this, it's a matter of stepping back, like you said, and kind of enjoying the journey. Just stepping back. Sometimes you got to slow down to speed up, and you got to look around. The largest percentage of people that are unhappy are astronauts and Olympic athletes. Why? Because they get to a point, they hit it, and then they're done. So a lot of people think like, oh, once I sell this business, once I get 100 doors, whatever that number is, I'm going to be happy. That's like saying once I get to a place on the freeway, I'm going to be happy once I hit this exit. It's the journey of who you have to become. It's a daily ritual. It's not just like once I break through this looking glass, I'm going to be riding a unicorn to work and over a rainbow every day. It doesn't happen, right? I mean, you're going to hit traffic. Even if you made $2 million a day, you're still going to hit traffic in Los Angeles. It doesn't matter, right? So my point is I think that we look for something, we try to kind of look for the future and we ignore the current. And I think it's a big mistake. And again, I people ask me all the time, they say, hey, Steve, when are you going to quit your job being an airline pilot? And I asked them, why should I quit my job being an airline pilot? They said, well, you've got a lot of real estate. You make all this money. You sold your business. I'm like, and I get to travel the world in a $200 million 787 aircraft. And I get to see the world. I get to experience things. And I'll never forget one of my mentors. I'm a huge fan of being mentored and self-development. I probably, if I had to guess, probably $500,000 I've invested in myself over the years, like anyone has, right? And one of my mentors told me, he said, Steve, let me tell you something. He said, you're going to be very successful one day. And he said, my advice to you is don't buy things, buy memories. He said, you're going to buy all the cool cars. He goes, you're going to buy the houses. You're going to buy all that crap. He goes, that's a given. He goes, and then you'll probably upgrade to a nicer car or whatever. But he goes, you know what? He goes, going on safari in Africa, that's a memory. Having dinner in Greece on the Mediterranean with your spouse, that's a memory. He goes, cherish the memories and make those your vision board, not things. And I never forget, he told me that at the time, I didn't know because I was grinding it out. I'm like, yeah, that's great. Easy for you to say. You're going to these places. But I kind of understand what he says now. And I understand what he means by that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I love the idea of making sure you're enjoying the journey. Because what I often see, we always talk about like sacrifice, that you have to sacrifice to achieve your goals and things like that. And I agree that you have to sacrifice Netflix and maybe sacrifice some sleep and some comfort and things like that. But what I cringe at when I see people sacrificing the ends for the means, meaning if they are trying to get financially free so they can go to their daughter's soccer game, but then they skip their daughter's soccer game to try and get to where they want to be, which is going to their daughter's soccer game. I'm like, okay, we got to think that through just a little bit. Like slow down to speed up, like you said. And if you just take the right steps, I feel that you can get to your daughter's soccer game, but still arrive at your desired destination without sacrificing what you ultimately want to obtain. Does that make sense? I see that all the time. And it's just...
It does. You know, what's funny is and this is very similar along those lines. You and I are very similar the way we think is whenever I coach people and I do stuff, masterminds and stuff. When I ask people, I say, what do you want? Like, tell me what you want, like clean slate. And what they do is they will go on a tirade for about 5 minutes telling me, I don't want a job. I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want a 9 to 5. I don't want to worry about money. And I'll listen to them for about 5 minutes. And when they're done, I'll say, okay, my question was, what do you want? You went on a 5-minute tirade telling me what you don't want. Let's try that again. And a lot of times they'll think and they'll sit there and they'll go, you know what? I don't know what I want. I know what I don't want. And basically you're running away from what you don't want. You're running away from your fears. You're running away from all the things you don't want. But when that's all you're thinking about, guess what happens? You get exactly what you don't want because that's your focus. It's like driving down the road and you see a rock and you stare at that rock, you're going to hit it. When you're driving, just because you say you don't want the 9 to 5, but when that's all you're thinking about and you're thinking about how miserable you are in your job and this and that, guess what's going to happen? Your brain is a supercomputer. Your brain doesn't know the words I don't want. It just knows 9 to 5. It knows be miserable. That's all it knows. And so a lot of times, like I said, it's very, very much like you talked about, a lot of people, they will pay more for the cure than the prevention. Meaning let's say, you could stop smoking right away, but they don't. And then they find out they have lung cancer and then they'll pay anything for that.
Yeah.
They could have just stopped smoking, stopped buying cigarettes. It's the Tony Robbins, people do what they should, not what they must. Right? Or they do what they must, not what they should.
Yeah.
And so the challenge is until that becomes a must for them, they can make it work, kind of missing their daughter's games. I mean, look, I growing up and doing business, I sacrifice. I get up at 4 a.m. every day and I go to the gym. Why? Because it's important to me and I don't want to miss that. And that's a core value of mine of commitment. So when people tell me, they'll be like, hey, Steve, why do you get up? Like, how do you do that? I'm like, well, it's simply you set your freaking alarm clock and you wake up. If I got to get up at 2 a.m., I get up at 2. Like, that's just how it is. And they're like, oh, I could never do that. And my answer is, and you never will, because you've already failed. Like, you've already committed to not doing it. You just choose not to. Say that you won't do it. Don't say you can't do it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that's a good point. I never thought about that. And so again, I'm very intrigued by how we think as humans. And, I as an airline pilot, I get to travel the world. So I get to see a lot of other cultures. And I see some great things about where we live in our Western civilization. I see some things where, we're not the strongest at. And we have some weaknesses that other civilizations and other societies are much stronger with disciplines. And I just think it's interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think people get really, social media has made this financial independence, retire early, this FIRE thing, this financial freedom thing, a real big idea, which is fine. I'm totally on board with that. I think everybody should kind of have that kind of a target in mind. If that's ultimately what makes them happy and that's where they want to be. But what I think happens oftentimes is people get in a real big hurry to, like you said, run from what they don't want rather than figuring out what they truly want and setting that as the destination. Because it's funny, like you'll ask people, well, why do you want to get into real estate? Well, I want financial independence and I want to be free. From what? Like, then what are you going to do? And most of the time they haven't thought past that. They just feel that they don't want to be in their job for whatever reason. And some of those are validated and are valid. And some of those maybe are just a point of view or perspective that needs to be shifted. But they oftentimes will, I don't know. I don't like where I'm at. So I'm going to run away from that and try and go to this financial independence thing. And I think we need to slow down and just figure out exactly what it is that we want. Because oftentimes the best strategy is to maximize. I think Grant Cardone talks about this. Maximize your first income first. Make as much money as you can at your first job, whether you're in sales or whatever, and then use that money to invest into real estate. Like that oftentimes is the best strategy, not leaving your job because it's work and you don't like it and it's a struggle. Like I understand sometimes there can be scenarios where it's just absolutely you need to get out of that thing and find a different job. But I do think that you need to be very self-aware of why you're feeling the way you're feeling and making sure that your goals are truly where you want to be and where you want to be, your destination, and not just stuff that you see and hear on Instagram.
Yeah, it's funny. I get people that say the same things. It's funny. They'll say, I want financial independence and I want freedom. I'm like, well, then quit paying your bills, quit your job, go get a VW Bug, go live down by the river, and you'll get all of that. Nobody will give a shit about you. Like that. If that's what you want, you can have that in life. But they're like, oh, I don't want that. I'm like, well, it has to be a quantifiable amount. You can't just sit there and give this ambiguous word. And because that's the cool thing to say, it's like, what does that mean? And so like, when I ask people all the time, I'll say, what's your goal? And they go, I want to own 10 properties. Okay. Owning 10 properties is a strategy. That is not a goal. That's like saying, I want to jump on the 405 freeway in Los Angeles. My question is where are you going? What is the destination? Because the 405 freeway may not take you to where you want to go if you need to go to Phoenix.
Yeah.
And so they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. I'm like, those 10 properties give you something. It's giving you that freedom. It's giving you that lifestyle. It's giving you all that. But that has to be tied to a quantifiable amount. It's got to have a date. It's got to have a goal. And so again, we know like the first 1/10 of what it is, but we don't go, like you said, we don't go into the second, third, fourth layer of what does that actually mean. We just go, I know what I don't want, and this is what I want. But they can't identify it with anything. And I get a lot of people, you probably do too, where they'll say, hey, hey, Steve, can I bend your ear? Is this a good deal? They shove it like 2 inches from your face. Like that makes it a better deal for me to look at. But so then they're like, is this a good deal? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what a good deal is to you. This deal could be a good deal, but it could also make you bankrupt depending on your situation, depending on your strategy. And more importantly, is this even getting you to your goal? A lot of people, they just want to hurry up and get a deal, but it takes 3 to 4 times more mental stress and financially to get out of a bad deal than it does just not to buy it and make sure it's the right deal. And that's where I think that's where social media and a lot of this stuff hurts people, because they see the 3-second window into someone's life that they're buying these deals, but they don't know everything that's had to happen, how many losses and failures and mistakes that led to that. They're just saying, wow, I'll give you an example. I got a guy that I coach and he was like, yeah, I think I'm spread too thin. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, I'm learning how to buy apartments and I'm learning how to buy wholesale. I'm learning subject to, he's like, and I'm learning, he's got this list, right? And I said, let me ask you a question. Does the guy who do subject to, does he do apartments? He's like, no. And I go, does the apartment guy do seller financing? And he's like, no. I'm like, so you're basically as deep as a can of tuna, as opposed to deep in one vertical like an oil well. I'm like, these guys are staying in their lanes. You're just watching all of them. I'm like, the key to being successful is the process of deselection. It's a matter of saying no to everything else so that you can focus on the one thing that you're going to be good at and say yes to that. I'm like, you're saying yes to everything. So you're really saying no to any kind of success because you don't know what you want. And so finally I had to strip that away and I got him in his vertical and he was fine again. But he's like, man, you're right. He's like, I'm so scattered. I don't know which way to go. And I'm like, that's because you're saying yes to too many things.
Yeah. So I often see people get super frustrated and even myself, that it's not happening fast enough and they don't feel like they're making progress. I mean, I've been doing real estate for just a couple of years now. And there's days I wake up and I'm like, what am I even doing? I'm never going to get there. Never going to get there. Not buying properties fast enough. It takes too long. And now here we have you, you've been doing this a long time. 9/11 was when you were threatened to lose your job.
Yep.
What year was that? 99?
2001.
2001.
20 years ago.
Yeah. So this is a great point because any listener that thinks you're an overnight success, right? Because I just found you on this podcast or social media, talk to them about what it took over 20 years. Like, how did you persist for 20 years? So 2 questions. How did you persist for 20 years? And the second question is, what advice do you have for somebody that's just getting started and they're frustrated with how long it's taking?
Well, that's a great question. And you're right. Nobody sees the behind the scenes of what people go through. The reason that I persisted is I realized, again, going back to the 9/11 was there's no such thing as a safe, secure anything, right? And I remember a real quick story after 9/11, the days after, for people that remember, depending on how old you were, all the planes that were in the sky had to land immediately or they were going to be shot down. Okay. Yeah. So planes were scattered all over the world, all over the country, especially. And I had gotten my furlough notice, but then we were dispatched to go pick up these airplanes. Okay. And I remember I was walking through Denver airport. And if you've ever been in an airport where there's no human life, it's a very huge, cavernous, echoey building. And it's just like very eerie. Yeah. Nothing's going on, right? And you're just like, wow. And I'm in a fog. 9/11 just happened and we're going to pick up these planes. And I remember looking out at the tarmac and I remember seeing these planes parked. It looked like a cemetery. They're parked like in a jigsaw puzzle because they're just trying to fit them on the airport.
Yeah.
And I remember just looking out at the thing. And I remember thinking to myself, you know what? My life as I know it will never be the same again. I am screwed. And the reason that I'm screwed is because I allowed myself to believe in something that wasn't true. Call it what you want. I own it, right? I took ownership. I'm like, this is on me. Now, I didn't have anything to do with the towers falling. I didn't have anything to do with anything. But because of that happened, I am now dealing with the repercussions of this. And because I was not doing what I needed to do, which was be financially and fiscally responsible for me and my family, I'm now about to take the hit.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I remember telling myself, I will never, ever let anyone dictate my life or be in control of my future. So that was my why.
Yeah.
And when you're on that brink, right now, I'm in the airlines now. I'll go back to your answer and your question in a second. But what's interesting is now we're 20 years later, right? And now we're going through COVID. Airlines are laying people off. They're furloughing. There's this happening, right? So a lot of people, I've been on a lot of podcast shows for airline pilots because they're like, hey, you were that guy. You did something. And they're like, what's the difference between you now and you then? Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, obviously 20 years, but I took 20 years of massive action. I every single day got up and hit that punching bag. Like I was relentless because I vowed that I would never put myself in that position. Now I know other pilots same seniority as me, same time frame. They were scared back then. They're in the same position today, and they're scared today because they're relying on their job. I'm like, you know what? If it doesn't work, I'll be okay. I'm okay financially. So going back to your question, the reason that I work as hard as I did is, number one, I didn't have a choice, right? I was in survival mode and my back was against the wall, and I knew I had to do something. And I realized like it was like all of a sudden the columns clicked for me, and it became clear, like, you know what? I can't rely on anyone. Like you cannot. But I can't sit here and feel sorry for myself. Like I have to take action. So I just started taking action. And at first, I didn't know what I was doing, right? I started off wholesaling. I bought a course for like $10,000 and I learned how to double close. I learned how to wholesale properties. I had no idea what I was doing. And within the first like 30 or 60 days, I wholesaled a property, right? I did a double closing. And I literally had no clue what I was doing. The guy was walking me through this, and I did the deal. And he's like, man, he goes, you're one of the first students to ever do this that quickly. I'm like, why? I'm like, I just did what you said. He's like, that's it. Like, you did what I said. Yeah. He goes, most people don't do what I say. And I'm like, why wouldn't people do what you say? Like, I just paid you 10 grand. Like, I didn't even have 10 grand. I paid you that. And he's like, you'd be surprised. But he's like, as you go through and as you grow, keep that attitude. And I was just like, why? Like, to me, it was just unheard of, right? So as I started going through this process, I just kept taking massive action. And I was like, you know what? I don't care what people say. I had so many people tell me, like, you can't do that. You can't wholesale. You can't flip. I'm like, well, I don't know. I just made about $400,000 last year doing it. So I think I can. Like, it does work. but that's fine. And so to people that are starting out, going back to your question, you know, all the lights are not going to turn green, right? You're not going to have everyone in your corner. Not everyone's going to cheer you on, right? You have to learn to get tunnel vision. You have to figure out what you want. And every single day, I'm a big believer that you make a choice, right? Success and successful people have a recipe. And so do people who fail and lose. And when you wake up every morning, you make a decision. Which way am I going? Am I going to be successful today, or am I going to be a loser today? That's really what it comes down to. And the great thing is every day you can make a new decision. But those decisions of being successful, they build on each other. Well, so do being a loser, I guess. But they start building on each other. And you start meeting people and you start learning. And I'm a big believer of giving back. I help people. People follow me on social media. I'm always answering questions. I think it's responsible for me to help out and give back as much as I can. And it's just something I do. But the answer to the question is you have to take massive action. I don't care what you want to call it. If you are not doing something, like I tell people every day, like, oh, I made some calls today. There's no deals out there. I'm like, some calls? Like how many? A lot. What's a lot? Like 500? Did you actually call 500 people today? No, I called like 10, but only 2 answered. I'm like, are you, you know, it's kind of like the Grant Cardone thing, right? I'm a big Grant Cardone fan, 10X. That is the only way to survive. That's the only way to succeed. So until you have that fire and that why burning underneath you, it's not going to work. It's just, I just hate to tell people, like, it just doesn't happen. There's no easy button. You can have all the apps and gadgets and all the shit that you want. But if you don't have that drive every morning to wake up and go, you know what, I'm going to kick this in the ass today, it's not going to happen on its own.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like we were talking before, like I think mindset is step one. Getting the right mindset, even getting a coach or a mentor to get you into the right perspective and mindset is going to make everything else go so much smoother. You'll be better able to handle the obstacles that you come up against, which most of the time are based on assumptions that you've made and some inaccurate data. And they're usually just in your mind. Usually those obstacles are just in your mind. And it's a matter of getting a stronger why, bigger commitment, and the massive action to get around them. I think mindset is absolutely crucial. And it's so cool. Well, I mean, it's a good reminder that, you know, if you're, you know, people always say, well, yeah, why don't get a secure job, you know, a 9-to-5, like with a salary and those kinds of things. Like people always think that that's the secure place. But honestly, I think a lot of people, even with COVID, they realize that that's not as secure as they may have thought it was. And I think you have a very powerful why of just making sure that nobody, like you said, nobody's going to dictate where you are financially and whether you have a paycheck coming this Friday or not. That is super powerful. We have to remember that those secure jobs that everybody tells us to go to college and then get, they're not as secure as we sometimes think they are. But resilient and recession resilient real estate investments that can keep cash flowing through a downturn, that's a good, secure place to be, I think, right? I mean, you buy them right and you set them up right and you have equity in the deal, they can weather the storms and keep cash flow coming to your pockets, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I mean, real estate's been around for hundreds of years, right? It's not rocket science. We're not going to the moon here, right? I mean, you have a business model. Where basically someone at some level is giving you money to stay in your place, right? On a very primitive level, right? We can put acronyms, house hacks, Airbnbs, all this stuff. But essentially, you're giving 4 walls and a roof to someone, or maybe a couple hundred walls and roofs, in an apartment, and they're paying you for that opportunity, right? Your job is to provide clean, safe, comfortable housing. Their job is to pay to live there. Right? And whether it's hourly, daily, I don't care, right? And so the biggest challenge with all of this is, I think people go into this not without proper understanding of bad times, right? This sandbox has a lot of glass, right? And you can get cut. Mm-hmm. And what people don't understand, the biggest reason I see people failing in real estate, and look, 1 out of 3 landlords is in some form of lawsuit or litigation every single year. Right? Why? Because they don't understand that they're running a business. They're not living in a house and renting out a room, right? This is a business. It has income, expenses, laws, rules, regulations. You got the IRS, fair housing, eviction, property code. You've got all these things. And look, I know this because I owned a company that manages 1,000 properties, right? And what the biggest reason all these people are watching and protecting that tenant in the property. They're not there to protect the owner. Mm-hmm. They're there protecting the rights of the tenant. The one person who doesn't know those rights and they don't understand what they are is the landlord. And that's why so many of them get in trouble, because they don't understand that they are running a business. That business is not run off of knee-jerk reactions and emotions. It's run off of policies, procedures, structure. And look, you can sub it out to a management company or a realtor or whatever, however you want to do it. That's the great thing about real estate is you can leverage almost everything out. Right? You can leverage out your time, money, jobs, assets. All those things are leverageable. The problem is who do you leverage? When do you leverage it? And to what extent do you leverage it? That's what a lot of people, they have that challenge with, which is understandable. But before you do all this, I'm a big believer in knowing where you're going and setting up the foundation before you even get on the highway. Like I tell people, look, getting a deal is the easy part. It's also the last part of the puzzle. The first part is know where you're going, right? So I use the Disneyland theory, right? If Disneyland is where you want to go in life and you can quantify it and identify it, I tell people like $20,000 a month in passive income with 20 houses in 20 years. That's a goal, right? It's very basic, but that's a quantifiable goal. It's got a time, It's got a time limit, it's got a quantifiable amount. That's a goal. Now we got to say, okay, what does it take to get to Disneyland, the 2020? Well, you may have to flip 1 property, buy 2, flip 2 properties. That's the freeways, right? You're gonna get on and off the freeways. The last piece of the puzzle is what car are you going to drive? Is it going to be Is it going to be a single family? Is it going to be a multifamily? Is it going to be a mobile home? Many people, and I was one of them. Trust me, I've done this. Is we buy the car first and we go, where do we want to take it? Mm-hmm. And we don't even ask about a goal, right? Yeah. I couldn't even spell goal when I first started, right? And so we do it backwards. And that's why so many people fail, because they don't lay that foundation. They don't know where they're going. It's kind of like when you're going to Disneyland and you get lost and you pull over and you ask someone for directions. The first thing they're going to ask you is, where are you going? Yeah. If you can't tell them your destination, they can't give you directions. Mm-hmm. It seems unreal. It seems so ridiculous, but we do that all the time in real estate. All the time. And that's why so many people fail. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Everybody wants to know, like, what should I do? Should I get wholesaling, house hack, like burr, flip? Like everybody wants to know which is the best method. And it all depends on where you're going. That's perfect. They all work and they all suck depending on where you want to go, you know? Exactly. All with different results. That's perfect.
So for somebody that's getting into real estate and they're just getting started, what's the, I mean, we've kind of talked about a lot of probably the first advice you would give them, but what are some other things you would maybe 2 or 3 things that you would tell a new investor just to remember as they get into real estate investing?
Yeah. First thing I would tell them to do is learn to compartmentalize the people they hang around with. I'm a big believer. I teach the 3-3-3 forever. So you have your 3-minute friends, you have 3-hour friends, you have 3-week friends, and then you have forever friends. So a 3-minute friend is maybe someone you work with, you have coffee with, it's like you don't even like each other, but you say hi to each other, right? That's 3 minutes. The 3-hour friend is someone that maybe you go to happy hour networking with. Maybe you have some common interests, like you both like real estate, lunch, or whatever like that. Mm-hmm. The 3-week friend is normally people that you would maybe go on a family vacation with. Maybe you've known them 5, 10, 15 years. And your families know each other, kids play, all that stuff. Your forever friends are the people you grew up with, right? Maybe you can count them on your hand. Maybe they're from the neighborhood you grew up in. Now, if you think about it, your forever friends are the ones that like you could call in the middle of the night and be like, hey, I need bail money. Don't ask, just get here and I'll tell you when you're here. And they're like, I'm on my way.
Yeah.
You wouldn't call your 3-minute friend and go, hey, I need bail money, right? It's not going to happen, right? Or you'd probably lose that 3-minute friend. So my point is the reason I say you got to compartmentalize is there are certain people that you want to talk about real estate with. There are certain people you don't want to talk to real estate with. You ask 10 people or you tell 10 people you're going to get involved in real estate, 7 will say it's a bad idea and 2 will say it's a good idea. Mm-hmm. The 7 who tell you it's a bad idea have probably never even been involved in real estate. So why tell them? Why waste the time and energy? Right. You should be focusing. Look, we all have 24 hours in a day, right? No more, no less. We have 168 hours a week, no more, no less. What you do with them and who you spend that time with. So I'm not saying you get rid of friends that don't do real estate. That's why you got to compartmentalize them.
Yeah.
And you got to put them in a box. So I'll give you an example. When I'm doing real estate, I don't talk flying to people. When I'm flying, I don't talk real estate to people. They don't care, right? Mm-hmm. When I'm back home with the people I grew up with in Los Angeles, they don't care about either of it. They just want to go have drinks and beers and do whatever, right? So I've learned, like, I'm not that guy that says, hey, let me tell you about this real estate. I don't think people care. I think you have to chameleon yourself to the people you're around. And when you want to know real estate, you hang around real estate people. So that's the one advice. The other advice I would say is, look, there are plenty of people that have walked the path before you. It's very simple to follow their path, right? I'm a big believer in being mentored and schooled by smarter people than me, right? I go back to Michael Jordan, right? Michael Jordan, I think, was one of the best players in the history of the game, right? But he was also the hardest worker. This guy practiced 8 hours a day, every single day for one game that was an hour of playing time. So you got to ask yourself, was he the best because he practiced? Or was he the best because he was the best? And he was the best because he had coaches and the coaches trained him, right? You look at, there's a famous picture. You got Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson. You got Kobe Bryant and Phil Jackson. Common denominator, right? There's a reason. So I think you have to learn that you don't, investing in real estate, which is opposite of what we've learned in school. In school, it's a very solo type lifestyle. Business and real estate is a team concept. You don't have to be the smartest person on the block. You just hire them. You partner with them. You do deals with them. You associate with them. Masterminds, all these things. That's how you start engaging and growing. You're not going to grow by yourself in a cave on your own. It doesn't work that way, right? There's skill sets. I'm a big believer in disc profiling, right? We all have certain profiling in discs. There's some things we're good at. There's some things we're not good at. Don't ever ask me to, do the books or the accounting. I will make it worse 20 times. That's not my skill set. You want to talk to me about negotiating, skills, sales, marketing? I'm the guy. So learn to play to your strengths and learn to find what your weaknesses are and bring those people in so that it just makes you stronger.
Yeah, perfect. What's a mindset that you see in people that succeed as you've maybe even coached them along, or even people around that you watch succeed? What is a common mindset or characteristic that they have?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll say the one thing I've learned with a lot of successful people is they're very, very protective of their time. They actually, one of the things I was being mentored by someone one time, one of my coaches, And he was talking about basically saying no more than he says yes. And he said, Steve, he says, you need to learn the art of saying no. Not saying you don't have to do it. You may delegate it to someone else, but he's like, you have to learn what is your best skill set and what do you do and protect that. He's like, saying no is actually saying yes. And you've heard me say that before. And as we were talking, I'm like, well, that's easy for you. You're this multi-gazillionaire and blah, 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 blah. And you own all these businesses. And he says, you know what? Until I started saying no, I was just like you. He's like, I was running a reactive life. So the difference between reactive and proactive, reactive is when you're done with the day and you're like, I don't know where my day went. I've just been putting out fires, dealing with issues, this and that, blah, blah. It's running my life. Yeah. Proactive people say, I have a calendar. This is my schedule. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't happen. That's the difference. And so as we were sitting there talking and he's giving me this lesson of saying no, he says, and that's why your phone has rang 11 times while we've been sitting here and mine hasn't rang once. And I was like, so the one thing I've learned is they are very, very protective of their time. I had a gentleman I met, a meeting was set up and I got to meet him. It was I won't say his name, but it's very, very well-known, influential. And I'm thinking, oh man, we're going to hang out for the day. Like this guy, he's going to be awesome. He's going to like me. He's going to give me more time. Blah. So that time started shrinking, right? And finally I get to meet him and he's like, you have 11 minutes. And I'm like, 11? First of all, I'm thinking, where does 11 come from?
Yeah.
And he said, you know what? He said, listen, it's no disrespect to you, but he said, if I give you more time, I'm giving someone else less time that maybe needs me. And he said, so I think this is ample time. So of course, now it took me 2 minutes to figure out what it was I wanted to ask him because I didn't really have a question. So now I'm down to 9 minutes.
Yeah.
But I learned a very valuable part of that is the one question he asked, he said, what is the outcome that you want to have from this conversation? And I thought about that and I was like, I don't know. I thought we were going to hang out all day. So changed everything. But, I realized like they want to know, like, look, if we can answer this in 2 minutes, meeting's over. And I thought that's interesting. And he's like, look, I have to protect my time. That's it. That's the one thing I don't get back, So protecting your time is something I really try to do. I try to help people and I give them my time, but I'm very protective of it. And I would tell other people that you've got to learn to say no and protect your time just as much.
Yeah. So what do you tell somebody? Because a lot of times as they're getting into real estate, especially like me and many others, we have a full-time gig, and even you, right? You're still flying. You have a full-time gig. You're trying to invest in real estate and get started in that. What do you say to somebody that says, I just don't have time to start virtually driving for dollars or, start to find deals or investors or whatever? What do you say to somebody that says they don't have time?
Well, look, it's a choice, right? You have time. You have 24 hours a day. You can't tell me you're busy 24 hours. If you needed to sleep 2 hours, you sleep 2 hours, right? It goes back to being a decision. I don't believe when somebody says that to me, they're just quitting and they just want me to say it's okay for them to quit. Yeah. I don't say that. Yeah. Look, I tell them, look, if you want me to say it's okay for you to quit, then I'll say it. But does that really help anything? It's not getting you closer to your goal. You're just feeling it's okay to be a loser. You make a decision every day. If you've got to get up at 2 a.m. and drive properties from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. before you got to come back and get your kid ready, then you know what? That's what you do if it's that important. It's a matter of a hierarchy of what is important to you. So basically what you're saying is getting to a new lifestyle is just not as important to you. Because it's kind of like, you talk to someone, right? And for example, is if you're sitting on the couch and you're like, man, I'm just dead today. I'm not going to do anything. Nothing could move me, right? That's perception. But if all of a sudden a fire broke out and the building was burning down, I guarantee you would be lightning speed off that couch and through the building. Yep. What changed? Your motivation. So they're just not motivated is all. Whatever the drive is not driving them enough. So I would say then maybe you shouldn't do this because your drive and your motivation is not going to carry you to where you want to go. Because look, it doesn't get easier, right? The more successful you get, doesn't get easier. You have to get better. It stays the same, right? You have to learn to get better. So I'll give you an example. I look at deals when I was first starting out. I'd look at these properties. I had no idea if it was a good deal or bad deal. I would look at it. I would walk around and like, well, it's 4 walls and a roof and okay, it's going to give me this much money. Like, should I buy it? I don't know. So there was a lot of deals I would be like, someone would be like, oh, that's a bad deal. Don't buy it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a bad deal. I shouldn't buy it. So I'd walk away from it, right? I drive by those deals today, what the values are, how much money they make, the person who did buy them. I'm like, and so I've learned that it's still the same four walls and roof. That house has not changed. It's still a rental property, right? It's the business model that's running inside of that, right? So again, I look at deals now that I couldn't have done way back when, whether it's seller financing, subject stuff that I know, or I coach people on and stuff. I didn't know those, but I got better. Yeah. Seller financing, subject to, those didn't get better. Those pretty much stayed the same, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. The variable was me. So my answer is you have to elevate yourself. It's not going to elevate for you, right? And if you don't, then I would say get out, then don't do this. This is not the realm for you. Or find something that has the passion and the drive, because you've got to have that drive, because there are dark days, right? There's days you're going to get punched and kicked and knocked down. And look, it could happen for months and years. And there's no guarantee that after doing all that, you're actually going to be successful. That's why I'm a big believer in following the path of other people and getting coached and mentored, because I'm like, I don't want to go down this path, right? I've made all the mistakes. I know what it looks like to have properties that are on the verge of losing them and problems with finances. I know what that's like. I don't want that feeling. Why not go with someone else that says, hey, do it this way, stupid. This is a much easier way and it'll get you there faster. Okay, I'll try that. Yeah. So that's my answer.
Yeah, I love that. And I think when it comes to motivation and choosing to allocate your time appropriately, I think the stronger your why is, or the more clear you are on your why, the easier it'll be to stay motivated and just to get after it and put in the necessary time. So the why is important. And the other thing I think that helps to stay motivated is if you have a big enough goal or target or vision of what life can become for you and what you can achieve in this life. If those goals and visions are big enough that because sometimes we set goals that are too small, and so there's no real, we don't feel like they're going to change our life or really get us anywhere, and so that it's just not motivated enough. And so I know Grant Cardone's a big advocate of just these stupid goals that are just ridiculous out there, right? And sometimes that's what it takes to start your mind thinking bigger. And okay, yeah, if I got there, I would really be able to help a lot of people, really be able to give back to a lot of people, and spend more time with my family or whatever it is. Those big goals are sometimes enough to pull you and propel you into more action. So again, it's all back to that mindset. Like motivation it's such a fleeting thing. Like it can be we're all so moody sometimes that, sometimes we wake up.
I've learned motivation is a battery. It drains over time. And I'll tell you a quick thing about setting goals. My business coach, he was like, look, if your goals don't make you nervous when you say them out loud, they're not big enough. Very simple. Yeah. And I was at an event one time and a gentleman, his name was Brad Sugars, very influential business coach out there. And he just finished speaking in front of a couple thousand people. And it was in Las Vegas, and we're sitting at the bar, and he was actually sitting next to me, and we were hanging out. And I'll never forget this. This is a good story here. He says, "So Steve, when's the date?" And I'm like, "Date for what?" And he's like, "The date you're going to sell your business." Now our business was probably about 3 years old, right? 2 or 3 years old, just started. Yeah. And I'm like, I just listened to this guy talking about building a legacy with your business and all this stuff, and so I'm like, oh, Brad, I'm not going to sell the business. Like this is a legacy. Like I'm doing this for family and this and that, blah, blah. And he's sitting there listening. And he goes, you don't understand. He said, the reason that you need to have a date is because the definition of a business is a commercial profitable enterprise that runs without you. If you don't have a date, that means you don't have a saleable asset. A saleable asset means that it is operating without any of your involvement. And he said, if you don't have a saleable asset and you don't have a business, guess what you have? You have a job. And so I'm not saying you have to sell your business, but I want a date of when this is going to be running without you and your business partner so that it is a saleable asset and you could sell it. So I'm like, now I'm thinking, why did I sit next to this guy, And so he's like, so give me a date. And I'm just like, so I throw a date out there. February of 2020, right? It's like far enough away. And he's like, write it on the cocktail napkin. So I'm like, write it on the napkin. We sold our business within 6 months of that date. Is it coincidence? I don't know. We never planned on selling it. That was never our goal. It just happened in a line that it did. I can't put words into how it happened. I just know that we sold that. Coincidentally, he actually became a business partner of ours. We brought him in and he helped us scale it and grow it and all that stuff. But I never forget that conversation, man. I never will forget that. And so that's when you talk about goals, it's sitting in your subconscious. You don't think about it, but it's there. And whenever opportunity's thinking, it's popping, right? Yeah. Our plan was never, even up until the point that we did the deal, we were never planning on selling. And our business was running great. We didn't need to sell. I mean, we got a pretty good settlement, which is why we did, but didn't need to. But I always remember that of the date. I wish I would have saved that napkin. That would have been cool.
That would have been cool. Yeah. Have that framed somewhere.
Yeah.
This, if the listeners are paying attention here, we have talked a lot about mindset, and really, honestly, these little things that we've been discussing are just subtle tweaks to the way we're thinking and our perspective on things. It's not like these big shifts. Maybe it is for some people, but most of the time it's just like, oh, if I just stand over here and look at it from this direction, all of a sudden it makes more sense to me and I have a more clear vision and I'm more motivated. It's just like, these are really subtle things. And we have to be, I think that mindset has to be revisited every day. I think every morning you have to get your head right. I think even every night you have to reset, review the day, reset, and go to bed with the right mindset, because our mind follows this law of trying to go back to where we're comfortable and trying to go back to where we're making sense of not achieving and our excuses and our obstacles. And so if we don't revisit that on a regular basis, we're going to struggle. Final question, I think, here, and then we'll start wrapping up. What are some tips that you can give to our listeners on how to keep their mindset right, their head right, regarding what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah. And let me just say, everything you said, I completely agree with. You know, I think everybody here, right, that's listening or watching this is probably in the top 10%, right? Let's just call it what it is, right? They're doing things that are separating them from the rest of the herd, right? The challenge, though, is what got you here in life is not going to get you to where you want to go. True success is not at the 10% level. It's more at like the 3% level. But just like you said, that's only 7% difference. You don't have to make it's not major course corrections. It's like driving a car really fast. You just move the steering wheel just a little bit, right? So it's just smaller course corrections of changing how you think. You don't have to grow a third arm. It's not like all of a sudden, like you got to start doing this stuff. You just have to change certain things. So you got to ask yourself, how do I get that 7% difference? How do I go from 10% to 3%, right? And so it's exactly what you said. It's having daily rituals. I am a big believer. I'll give you an example of what I do, right? So every morning when I get up, it takes me about an hour to get through my morning ritual. My wife makes fun of me, but I get up, right? It takes me about an hour. I write my I am statements, right? I write my goals. I have 3 goals every quarter, every 90 days, because your brain works in 90-day cycles. I have 3 goals. So I write my goals out. I've got a sheet that I created on my own. I write down my 90-day, my 3 goals, and I write what is one thing I have to do today in order to achieve that goal in the 90-day. So then I have 20 I am statements. So I am is basically stating something about you or your success in the future, but you're saying it in present tense, right? So I'll give you an example. One of the things I said is I am a published author, right? That was one of my I am statements. Well, I wrote a book on my life and my life story. So I am a published author. I am a speaker traveling the world. I've done 2 tours speaking throughout Australia. I've spoke all over the United States. Is that coincidence? I don't know, right? So I'm a world-class speaker. So all these things you write down. So in every single day, I write them down, right? I write them down every freaking day. Then I meditate, which I'm not a meditating person, I'll tell you right now. So it's very hard, but I go on YouTube and I Google guided meditation. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then it walks me through it. So I do that, right? Does it help me? I don't know. Probably. I know a lot of like special forces, pro athletes, they all learn the power of meditation. So I'm like, well, if they do it, I should probably do it too.
Yeah.
I do that. And then the last thing that I do is I write out my schedule for the day. I look through my phone, through Siri, my calendar, all this stuff, and I write it down. What are 5 must-dos today? What are some, and if I only have 2, I only have 2. But what are things that are non-negotiable that I have to get done no matter what? Like I'm not going to bed if I don't get these things done. So careful what you put on that list. And then from there, I have things to do. So this is just shit I got to get done. It's not necessarily has to get done today, but it's things on my list. Oil change, right? Stuff like that. But I do have some things like if I'm coaching someone or if I'm on a podcast show, those are musts. I have to do those. Those are things that I have agreed to do. I'm responsible to show up. Those are things I have to get done. Maybe it's a phone call. Maybe it's I got to call 50 owners. Whatever the case is, those are non-negotiables. So that's what I do. And so I'm not saying you have to do that, but what I'm saying is you've got to get into a ritual. You've got to get into a habit, right? Your life is made up of rituals and habits. Sometimes because you don't have them, that is a ritual and a habit, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have those, you've got to learn to retrain your brain to the right kinds of rituals. And so that's what I do. And I would suggest, definitely read. It could be, I'm going to read 10 minutes a day. It already takes me an hour and I got to get out of the house to get to the gym. So I don't do the reading. I listen to Audible. So every day at the gym in my car, all I'm listening to is Audible books. So that's how I do my reading. Cause I only have so many hours in the day and I got to figure it out. But that's my suggestion.
Yeah, I think that's super strong. And there's tons of ideas out there. I mean, I love that routine that you have. I never thought I would be a meditator, but I have been doing some of that. And it's actually been pretty powerful. Just clearing my head and getting into the right mindset. Yeah. It's been huge. So morning routine is big and the habits and rituals. So the listener should think about it this way. The habits and rituals that you currently have, not the ones you think you have, but the ones that you really have and you really act on, those habits and rituals have gotten you to where you are now. So if you're dissatisfied with where you're at or the what you've achieved so far, it's a result of your habits and your rituals. So let's change those. Whatever it is, follow Steve's recommendation. The Miracle Morning, Hal Elrod is a great place to start. You can tweak some of his ideas. There's tons of books out there on morning rituals and habits. The Atomic Habit is a great one. A great book about developing habits. There's tons of stuff out there. So I definitely agree with that. That's a very strong, some strong recommendations for us to wrap up on. If people want to reach out to you, follow you, where can they find you?
Yeah. They can follow me on Instagram, Rozenberg Steve. So it's ROZENBERG Steve. Obviously they can do that on Facebook as well. They've got a YouTube channel where I drop a lot of content and information. So traveling the world, I do videos wherever I'm at around the world. And I give a lot of free education out there. I've also got a website. They can go to my website, steverozenberg.com. And they're welcome to, they want to join a mastermind. They want to have a conversation, whatever. I'm very approachable. Look, I've been there. And like I said, my goal in life is to help as many people as I can. So if I can help more people and just think a little bit differently, then, my job is done.
Yeah.
That's really the best way to get a hold of me.
Perfect. Thank you. And the meetup or the mastermind that you're doing, I'm on the email list. I have not been able to line up getting on it yet, but where do they find that? Where can they get on that?
They can go to, my website is livethinktank.com. And I get top name people on there, personal friends of mine that you can do live. It's live Q&A with them. I also do in the mastermind, I do 2-hour deep dive workshops. So, how to get your property leased correctly, negotiation scripts. This week I'm doing one on disc profiling. So it's a 2-hour deep dive. Mm-hmm. And then I do once a month, I do a session on mindset. I go through mindset and I actually coach people on there. Like they'll come on and they'll tell me what their problem is and I'll just start asking questions. And sometimes I got to call their bullshit. I'm like, that's, I'm not, but they really like it because it's real down and dirty. It's raw. It's actually effective. So if they go to livethinktank.com, they can do that as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, that would be powerful. I think putting yourself in those kind of scenarios, those masterminds and meetups, that's super powerful. So
yeah, it's to me, masterminds are great because you get to associate with like-minded people that are in your level. They're trying to figure out. But I had my friend Tim Bratz on. The guy has 4,700 units. I just had my buddy on the other day, yesterday, Daryl Dyke. He has a hard money lending company. So I bring on all these people, and they can ask questions that they wouldn't normally get in front of, the Brandon Turners, Charles Yarby. They don't get in front of those people, but they can with my mastermind because I'm friends with them and they come on. So I'm giving them access into a portal that they probably wouldn't normally get access to these kinds of people to ask them the down and dirty one-on-one Q&A stuff. So
powerful. Definitely. Guys, listeners, take advantage of that. That is a dang good resource. And I got to get that lined up on my schedule too. But Steve, this has been awesome. We have dove into some awesome mindset tips and tactics. Hopefully the listeners have grabbed onto a couple of ideas that they can maybe it's just a subtle tweak to their perspective and their mindset can make a world of difference. And I appreciate you being on as a guest. I've learned a ton. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate having you on, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it, bud.
Thanks for listening to the Money Maven Project podcast. A true Maven shares knowledge with others, so be sure to share this podcast and leave a review. Thanks so much. And until next time, live life with intention.